All right, everybody. I am here with Stephen Anderson. He is a mortgage broker with Nations Lending. It is his own company, which I did learn the other day, which I think is super cool. It's always nice to see young professionals leading and doing awesome things in the business. So when we talked the other day, you blew my mind with this program that apparently has been available, but I didn't know about. Within the city of Largo, if somebody wants to buy a house, there are funds available to help them pay for the house. So that is cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's so great.
So where does the money come from, and how can they kind of, if you wanted to go over that a little bit?
Yeah, so the city of Largo sets up a fund, and the Tampa Bay CDC, they process it for the city of Largo.
Okay.
So the money comes from, it's technically federal funds, and they use that money to help first-time homebuyers.
That's awesome. So as far as first-time home buyers goes, who qualifies within that term?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of misconceptions about first-time home buyers, right?
Okay.
So a first-time home buyer for these programs is technically anybody who hasn't owned a home in the last 3 years. So you could have owned a home in the past, but maybe you've been renting for 5 years or 3 years, you would be eligible for this program.
That's awesome. It would work for people who have moved to the area recently. Now that means that you haven't been on a deed. You haven't held title to a property in the last 3 years. So just wanted to clarify
Correct.
that for everybody. All right. And so what are kind of the qualifications? Where can they buy? Oh, I guess first of all, who qualifies for this type of loan?
Okay, so the type of borrower that qualifies typically falls into an income bracket, and the income brackets are based on HUD's income, median income levels.
And that's housing and urban development.
Yes, housing and urban development. So they have an income level that they have for the United States in each county, and in our county, it starts at $35,800, and then for every person that's in the household, that number goes up. To where at 5 people, it's upwards to $55,000 in income for the household, and that is household income. So it's any person who makes money in the house.
Okay, very good. All right. And so, where can they buy the home specifically? Because I know there's Largo, then there's unincorporated Largo. How does that work?
Yeah. So any property that is in the tax code LA, which stands for Largo, so anyone that has a tax code of LA is an eligible property in the city of Largo. Now, there are some places in Largo that are in a flood zone, and they don't do anything that's in a flood zone. So you have to be cognizant of that. But if it's not in a flood zone and it's in the tax district of Largo, it's eligible.
And if you're working with a rockstar real estate agent like myself, I will make sure that whatever properties we find for you are definitely in the Largo tax district and are not in a flood zone. Very cool. Okay, so what can they buy? You kind of talked about the flood zone. What price points are we looking at here?
So the program doesn't allow for anything over $190,000 purchase price. Under that, eligible for anything. Now, when it comes to properties that are under $190,000, you do have to consider that sometimes those properties might not be in good shape, right? So they do have a city inspector that comes out and checks the property. We're gonna talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, but as long as it's under 190, it should be eligible.
That's awesome. So yes, it's a little difficult to find those homes in and around Largo, but they do exist, I promise, absolutely.
Yeah.
So talk about the process, like how do they get qualified, or is there any classes they have to take? And again, the part about the inspectors that come out and we'll preface this next bit of the conversation by saying that you don't have to remember all of this. When you work with a partner like Stephen and his company, they will take you through this and baby step you all the way because they've done this multiple times, they know what you need to do, and they will help you out. But to give you kind of an overview, talk a little bit about the process.
Absolutely. So the first thing you'll want to do is you want to get with a mortgage professional like myself to find out what your debt ratio is. One of the qualifications of the program is that we have debt ratios that we have to meet. A debt ratio is your debts versus what you make, your income. So we take your income and we divide it by your debts, and that gives us a ratio. The front end ratio would be your housing, and then the back end ratio is your housing plus all of your other debts that are on your credit report, like your credit cards, car loans, student loans. So the front end ratio needs to be 33% or less, and the back end ratio needs to be 45% or less. And then you would be in a qualifying state for that. Like we talked about earlier, your income can't be over a certain amount to qualify. And then for the property, once we get started and get under contract, there will be an inspection that most likely everybody does their own inspection.
Sure.
We always do that, right? But then there's an appraisal, and after the appraisal, the city inspector will want to come out and inspect the property for the city of Largo. They want to make sure that they're getting the house that you're getting into is meets their safety standards. So the city inspector does that. Meanwhile, you'll also be doing some education. They want to make sure, because you're a first-time home buyer, that you understand the home buying process and what goes on with buying a home. So they have 3 different steps in that education. The first is a group education that you can either do online or you can do in person. The second step is a one-on-one that is done prior to closing, and then they also have a budget class as well that you can take after closing. It has to be done within 6 months of closing.
I'm telling you right now, that budget class is definitely one you want to go do.
Yeah, for sure.
It's certainly eye-opening. You don't realize. But overall, even with the added expenses you have of things like, mowing your lawn or paying your, water bill or whatever, saving money for expenses later, like putting on a new roof, you really are saving money when you think about how much the rental rates are in Pinellas County. I mean, if you think about a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, with a garage, you're probably looking at $1,500 per month in a good neighborhood. Now, if you're purchasing a $190,000 home, the monthly rate's going to be significantly lower, right?
Right, and that's the one great thing about this program that's a little different than some of the other programs is that they don't require payback on this loan.
What?
They don't require payback for 20 years.
Okay.
So they can live in the home for 20 years without having to worry about making a payment on this down payment assistance loan.
Wow. And so talk a little bit about that. What happens when that payment starts happening? Is it included into their
So when you speak to Tampa Bay, the CDC, they will work with you at that time when the 20 years is up. They will work with you on a payment plan.
Okay.
It may be $50 a month, or it could be $100 a month, depending on where you are at that point. Now, the one other thing to consider is that sometimes people, they decide that they want to move before 20 years, right? Sometimes it's a starter home, and 5 years down the road, they're ready to move. When you do move, it is paid back in full. So it would be paid back through the sale of the property.
So you'd be paying back what you mortgaged, which at that time would hopefully be less than the $190 plus the $25,000.
Correct,
Okay.
And it's interest free, so they don't add any interest to it for the time that you've had it.
Oh, that's nice. Now, at the 20 years, does interest start accruing at that point?
There will never be interest on this.
Okay, very nice.
Yeah.
But you don't have to borrow the full $190,000, right? You're using the $25,000 to cover what? Closing costs?
Yeah, so the $25,000 can be used for closing costs, and it can be used for down payment. Typically, any loan that we do, whether it's FHA or conventional, is going to require a minimum down payment. So FHA is 3.5%, conventional is 3%. So when you do an FHA or conventional loan, you have that amount. But typically with the $25,000, what happens is we get maybe then 10% or 15% of the purchase price. So it is going to be the total loaned amount is almost always going to be over 100% of what the purchase price is. Now, if the client decides to put some of their own money towards it, then decide to put some of their own money towards the transaction, that would lower their total loan to what their purchase price was below the $190. But this program is developed so people don't have to put any money towards the transaction. So most likely they will have borrowed $190,000.
Okay, and so then that's being made up by the $25,000.
Correct.
Plus the
The
sales
main
price.
loan amount that they're paying on is going to be much less than $190,000.
Okay, that makes sense. So they're able to use that $25,000 to cover their closing costs, their down payment, and some of the purchase price.
Correct.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, so if anybody wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
So there are multiple ways to get in touch with me. The best is my phone number. So let me give that out. It's 727-256-7733, and it will be below the video. You'll be able to click on it. And they also can go to my website, which is Stephen Anderson. So that's STEPHEN ANDERSON .nationslending NATIONSLENDING.com. So stephenanderson.nationslending.com. They can go there. Right there, they can apply online, right at that website, or they can call me. I always prefer when they call me. I love talking to people. So.
Well, this is really in depth. I mean, and there's a lot of nuances. There's a lot. I mean, we haven't even gone over really the meat and potatoes of this. I mean, we covered the basics so that people get an idea and can kind of know if they qualify. But they really should give you a call and pick up the phone and make sure that their situation is right for this particular product. And if it's not, then you can help them find another product that is working for them. And that's what's great about mortgage brokers is that they do have an array of programs that they can find and match people up with. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. I know I certainly did. I didn't realize that there was $25,000 of money out there that could help people with down payment assistance for purchasing a new home. So thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me.
You're welcome.